Impromptu Profundity Pathways of Spirit. Greg Robert Norton, June 2025. Starting out with some ideas in a jazzy improvisational style, I'll get down on paper the first thoughts which arise to the surface of my consciousness. The more I think about how life is, I think we only pretend that we have gained a measure of control over our subconscious minds and phenomena. Closer to the truth is that the subconscious mind is an enigma, wrapped inside a paradox, and might be anything but easy to deal with, if the best we can ever do might be a carefully modulated and controlled miracle working. Then we better familiarize ourselves with every aspect of our show to make this happen. I'm given these doubts about whether our youth are prepared. Good living experiences will be enough, as will be knowing how to rise to collegiate challenges as well. Living has taught me to accentuate the positive. Time has been very good to me in my recent memory, as I was a late bloomer. But I mean, if you're not bothered by my having had a serious self-injury attempts and 7 years of the pain of Hades, then you'll see the worth of my outcome. If you can overlook these two details, we can really count our blessings. But any word like this might be good work if you can't find it with some sense of purpose, such as is found in the careful discerning of what is in the heart, mind, soul, and spirit. As this is, you can manage to rise above the toil of doubts and fears. Your yoga stretch visualization will tend to bridge the pain in your life as a span crosses a deep river. Managing your pain to get easier after age 50 or so. You'll be so confirmed in how stream of consciousness, art, music, and poetry is the means to understanding the human heart, soul, and spirit, that you'll just start flowing onto the recording media and just see if anything materializes. If the deeper self is going to express itself, it can be recorded on tape or captured into a flow of language, into a word processor memory. But you'll miss it entirely unless you have the recorder running and remember to click save. Well, these words seem to sometimes strain to articulate the intangible. But if you can't follow along, you might be led to a helpful understanding along the way. As a young man, in the 1980s, I was somewhat cursed with being unable to see the pain of others. Now, my dreams are somewhat realized, but there might be those standing about who will be callous or indifferent as clinicians in the dissection class. After all, isn't this partly the objective? To better see into the heart of the matter. I just wish for the release of the perfect melodic musical figure, or the phrase so graceful and flowing that it transports the listener's spirit to a higher plane. To my reader or listener, there might appear to be a hidden order among my strains of chaos, ambiguities, and rote vector meanings. But this writing is meant to start into a new book project for the 2025 to 2026 period. I did a quick inventory this afternoon and discovered that since 2015, I'd written 70 chapters of original literature, which I've set to 70 original piano and keyboard music soundscapes. That's a lot of work. I sure can't take for granted or squander this time with half-hearted or mediocre work in the present, but should keep up this strong work carefully. I think that what I would say about my subconscious mind phenomena might be about how such at one time might be terribly raunchy, and the next time simply be mild and pleasant. And these might just go without any explanation as to why's or how's for either one. Quantum phenomena might be random, indecipherable, but both easy and difficult will have to be bridged mindfully to get through the arduous day. You'll want to listen to your still, small voice. Some kind of yoga stretch visualization is a must. I'm glad, in starting new writing, such as this is, that I'm conscious of the imperative to solve structural issues and clear up ambiguities right from the start. If I don't wish to be troubled by phenomena that has no rhyme nor reason, that is, there will be some ways to affirm the positive outcomes, the meeting of the challenges. But I had to learn, over time, the ways to walk by faith and to meet the objectives. When the tender sprout is stringently challenged, as in when we already know some things, how it might take a lifetime to learn to walk by faith and to see past the subconscious phenomena into the having of belief in one's whole self, heart, mind, soul, and spirit. Then can I do what is required of me. Some objectives simply must be accomplished. Some obstacles, likewise, must be overcome as well. My life has proven, if anything, that sobriety is attainable, even by a supposed underdog, even by black sheep, even by a dark horse. If I'm an example of a sober, yet artistically accomplished, and prolific path, then this sobriety might just be my strongest claim. Not to mention the wide variety of strong ideas which have flown through my typist's and pianist's hands, and artist's eye, soberly, with only a little caffeine. But it's not as if you have to forego fun, because the older and more experienced you get, the more you'll appreciate the values and importance, to so many, of a cup of coffee, and a notebook and pen, or a sketchbook. Still, it's like I was saying, when we think that we've got the subconscious phenomena figured out, that's a pretty good sign that we do not. The subconscious phenomena at the mind's eye can't be likened to a group of skittish forest animals, some of which riot and bite when cornered. We have to rely on an overwhelmingly competitive attitude of living, and to have an unbeatable rhythm, a track record of excellence. This is how the professional world operates. There's no other way to be. So, do you think that you could start out into the independent world, doing what it takes to live, and thriving? People who've been in the mental health care system for very long, many of them, mental health consumers, will be somewhat used to having certain responsibilities taken care of by professional managers, and administrative home staff, transportation, home and vehicle insurance, medical appointments, utility bills, lawn work crews, maintenance workers. All this will have been in others' hands for a long time. For some of us, it would be hard, if not impossible, to learn to live independently again. So, most of us never did. But, this is the world which today's graduates must move out into, and win in life in the modern world is unlike it was 30 years ago. That's for sure. You'll learn skills I never knew, if you're going into the world. At any rate, to sum it up, the mental health care system is a safety net. Some people we see in the news should have gotten help 5 or 10 years ago. Some people will not need help until they're very old. The truth is that most everyone will need short-term help of some kind, at some point in their lifetimes. No one's perfect, though we follow a perfect example. You see, well, this is the first article in a new set of writings. The new book. Starting the new enterprise, we usually face resistance, as there has been much talk of the limits of growth. Our planet is overcrowded, and we'll one day run out of certain resources. So new development can be hard. Well, these ideas are starting to come to their conclusion now. I'll wrap this writing up and add it in with the others. All for now, Greg. Tilda, as I sit, this afternoon, the time is around 4 p.m., and I'm starting to somewhat look forward to our evening meal. While I wait, I'm going to get down any thoughts which arise into this word processor, so as to move this project somewhat further along. When in thought there are numerous aggressive agents repeatedly crossing the single-cell wall membrane, such that there's a somewhat prevalence of these overt chemical phenomena, for us believe, I then can't tell that this sort of overbearance comes mainly when an adrenaline chemical jolt, felt and sensed by a mortal perspective, say a hiker, or camper on a mountain trail, polarizes, and piques the human consciousness, as in a call to action, such that the organism successfully avoids an environmental threat, or toxin, like a deadly spider, or a poisonous snake, in the path. I think that such a response as this is normal, when one is faced with a threat of any kind, such as this would be. I can't see that my whole being will definitely be in the clear, when I've quickly dodged this environmental threat. My organism will have already successfully avoided the threat, when my writing is the way it is now. Such will quite possibly have been a threat that I might not have physically seen with my mortal eyesight, but the very, very sharp adrenal chemical agents, repeatedly crossing my cell wall membrane over the entire duration, reveal the threat's hypothetical apparent presence to me nevertheless. You could suggest that quite likely, in the practical sense, what the organism might have been sensing, at such a time, being, say, indoors in his bed, will have been more of a somewhat less imminent danger, such as a less possible or likely cyclone threat, or other natural phenomena threat, such as seismic or volcanic worry, in the general future time frame, such as the season, or which might continue through the summer. But, to be sure, the immediate threat will have already passed, or been avoided, already. But, Why then did the harsh adrenal chemical cross the cell wall boundary in the first place? Why would the hostile chemical agents have crossed my boundary all day in the first place for? Was it mindless abuse or a call to action? Here's a metaphor which I like to use at this point in this line of inquiry. I would suggest that there wouldn't have been, or might wouldn't have ever been, any good qualities whatsoever associated in any way, shape, form, or fashion with human enslavement. It was only the devil's work. It would appear to me that an evil devil in such case as that would have exploited the existing power structure and made it appear to be convenient or practical to enslave those people back then. Back to my own example, my own mind is a no boundaries situation. My brain really has to accept any interference, even interference which causes improper operation. And the hostile chemical agents repeatedly crossed my figurative cell wall membrane just today. I figured for 8 hours, maybe more, today, and my sylvan inner heart and mind cognitive space were violated by these, what I would call overt, coarse agents. This, then was, or might have been a time to tough it. In other words, it might have been a super classic artwork. I also would suggest that one of the only times a chemical agent repeatedly crosses an organism's microcell wall membranes would be, wouldn't it, when such is either an adrenaline meant to bring about action, or reaction, or as induce pain. The classic artwork acquisition might well have been some dues to pay. Well, at any rate, bar time is nearly 7 p.m. I've had a plate of teriyaki chicken, and returned to my writing couch. Our day has gotten along, and I've managed to get along with everyone, and am thinking about this hawk bird, which stared at me through our kitchen doors this morning, trying to make up his mind about me, I guess, and just what the bird feeder on the porch is about. I was amazed that this slightly small hawk took such an interest in me, at my kitchen table. I try to give back to those littler than me if I have some extra on hand. This is what a bird feeder is. So I think he might could understand me, sitting there. We try to give back what we can. For myself, this is mainly so I won't feel begrudged or resented by the bird folk. Spread the wealth. At any rate, these things are floating through my mind while I'm sitting here getting these thoughts down, and I'm enjoying some privacy and listening to my jukebox music on my smart device. Our sunlight is fading to our west. Our planet is spinning counterclockwise from the north perspective, clockwise from the south pole perspective, and I'm looking greatly forward to at last getting my evening medicines, and getting this writing concluded with the others, and getting to sleep. I didn't sleep much last night, and am beginning to get a wet dish rag feeling about me. So, what I'm really looking forward to will be a bedtime snack, before turning in, and getting some rest. Well, I'm going to add these present thoughts in with the others, and see how they rate, and get this meeting taken care of later, and I can somewhat just see the way to some concluding thoughts for this second article in this Impromptu Profundity audiobook. I generally think that stream of consciousness, art, music, and poetry is the best means to understanding what is inside the human spirit, soul, and mind. When one knows that some days will be better than other days, you can definitely approach your empty notebook page with an wondering heart, and just peer and see the first ideas which arise to the surface on any given day. So, your best bet will almost always be to just see what ideas will arise with your notebook and pen or word processor. But, at any rate, at a time in the writer's life, well, at any time in the writer's career, the early, beginning expressions will be met by sizable invisible resistance. I think that this sometimes shrill resistance is somewhat the result of my being kind of close in to the central star. This has always afforded me an almost primal approval quotient from the most crudest of musical and artistic and literary means and construments. This would be great, except for the sometimes out invisible resistance which such primitive goodness sometimes inspires. Here's a question. If you knew that you were writing your own life's future, tit for tat, would you continue writing? Or would you be a little bit more choosy, and think of how, at the end of the day, having something to show for the time passed to myself is of better quality, in a general sense, than having nothing to show for the time spent? Well, this has been some stream of consciousness writing, for sure. I'm resting in the blessings of this benevolent spirit, the trusted mediumistic familiar. And that's not all, by any means. I'm also resting in a clean bed, in an apartment connected to a good providence, where meals, medicines, hygiene, and housework can be done with regularity. It's not too hard to keep a clean house when the utilities are paid, and so forth and so on, so that the residents can just kind of live and not be too burdened. We put a lot of trust, as well, in our sovereign land, and our good local county, state, and federal governments. The nation without secure borders can't afford sense of security to its citizens. But I've never had to worry at all about my nation's secure borders, or military readiness. And our military technology is generally ahead of the rest of the world. Ah yes, I'll just finish this article up, and add it in with the other, to conclude the second essay. All for now, Greg. Till that today is the first Wednesday in June, this year. I sit and tune inwardly, and get the first thoughts that arise down into this word processor memory. This morning is sunny and warm, and I somewhat get some thoughts started, so that I will have a project started for this day. I've seen so many mental states and frames of mind in my lifetime. This present peaked, alert psychic awareness is, I think, the type of overt mental state which I group in with mental illness states. However, I could be wrong. We could very possibly be dealing with an earthquake presentience, and not realize it. I have heard a good bit of talk online about the Yellowstone caldera and a Northeast Pacific volcanic eruption which is expected to happen soon. It looks to me like this Northeast Pacific volcano, which the scientists have been telling us about for more than a month, on the seafloor, is a bit of a trouble, and we could feel repercussions of it, even here across the continent. Such is, apparently, psychic presentience, like some of which I lived through in the 1990s. Only now, I am living right, and have developed from my crude mental phenomena into a diverse, many-faceted portfolio of creative expression. When states like this would overtake me, as a 25-year-old, I would spiral into a whirlpool of self-destructive behaviors and responses, and buy or steal, or borrow any substance whatsoever that I could to self-medicate such condition, never realizing the difficult trauma which lay ahead, the events of the millennium, and my second serious suicide attempt. At any rate, I've been clean and sober for 22 years now, so I am living right today. But if this phenomena is pertaining to a near future natural disaster, such might be on par with trauma and devastation, much as the millennial times were. I have grown to love this composition process. Anytime there's any problem with paranoid or self-critical delusional thinking, I get my smart device and word processor keyboard out, and try and make sense of the time on an external medium. This is what I am doing right now. And I stay sober and clean, unlike those years which were earlier, when I got isolated, and tried, at the end of my rope, to hurt myself seriously. So, the mental condition, this morning, is multifaceted. I don't even know if such pertains to one thing, inwardly, or another, exoterically. But mental illness does take many guises. I don't think that there's anything very wrong with me, or my strategies, these days. I do get hurt, sometimes, like recently. Additionally, my home group, I think, reveres me, and sees me as a perfect person, like some of them are. But, I'm not Superman. I have bad days, when I'm under more stress than usual, and I'll sometimes raise my voice at someone. But, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. I think that this state, yesterday and today, is psychic presentience of the robust and sudden kind. There must have been something that the scientists didn't know about until yesterday. This would explain how this experience yesterday got such a piece of my attention. At any rate, starting every new writing program, such as a book or musical album, you will usually encounter resistance. When I can't see the future, except by looking to the lessons of history and making the best estimates I know how, then your guess is as good as mine is. Time tells no secrets. Sometimes this is true. It's just that, in my work, dues paying, and hard work, sometimes comes up without asking permission first. This sometimes looks a lot like mental illness. I know that I sometimes have mood swings. It's just that digital publishing isn't easy work, and so many people resource my online music, art, and text files each day. Sometimes are easier on me than other times are. If there is seismic instability or volcanism in the picture, wouldn't I want to get such behind me and not be worrying from minute to minute? At any rate, from what I've seen, we've been warned just recently about some pretty bad natural disasters that could happen. I guess my thinking in such times as this gets kind of precarious. Is a thing one way or another, or one of thousands of things each day which affect me that I don't hear of or know of? So, this somewhat explains the latest troubles I've worried about, and then some. I don't think that I'm the only one who is dealing with these times like these are, in the best way they know how. We like to think that we're just going to react in exactly the right way in the event of emergency, but the reality is, some people react in unexpected ways when something goes wrong. I'll give you some examples. Some people put their most combustible fuel on any fire. They light fires. Others make an obvious mistake, a choice, because the choice was there to make. They emulate something they saw on television. At any rate, one has to know the difference between enough and too much. Storytelling is one thing, but some tales are way too personal. Or there's just no real good answer to a thing. It was a stalemate, or a paradox type of event. Or it just wasn't a very pretty story. Well, at any rate, when scary migraines seem to be hounding me here recently, I think that my cyclone prediction probability is changing. I mean, these strange dreams are too much. Such probably stands for bad weather. When my thoughts get somewhat bleak, I try and think of better things, such as my new music acquisitions, and the way much of what we find online is or will be a shared experience, a shared journey. One is never alone in dealing with mental phenomena. No man is an island. There's an excellent meditation for the glottis, the language and speech organs. We can see on-ramps and exit ramps in the way our speech behaves. Some people's talk is so bewildering and dark. I would emphasize this on-ramp concept to help you see how our speech usage alternately revs up and gears down. I think that we should try to articulate the pictures and images we see in our minds. If this causes the pond to rock, then it rocks. If one lily pad is rocking and rolling, if it's making splashes and waves, often making ripples in the water, then this will cause the other lily pads in the pond to rock and sway as well. I might be quiet and reserved, but I sometimes wonder at the way that these killer migraines cause more rocking and swaying, make more ripples in the water, than a clear mind does. These are just some thoughts. Do you think that just brainstorming over some writing makes splashes and waves? Probably. You don't have to make a lot of sound to somewhat stir things up. I'm somewhat coming through the brambles of this article now. Our pond should clarify, and the muddy waters return to translucence. This would be an enormous relief for myself this afternoon. My music sounds just great in my earphones now, so I would make a guess that our week's strife is on the downhill slope. The problem's already been averted. At any rate, I can't help that these thoughts are coming to their eventual conclusion now, so I'll wrap this article up and add it with the others. I hope you have a good downhill into another good weekend. I'll send these thoughts along your way now. All for now, Greg. Tilda, I have a few minutes before lunch, so I'll see just what's on my mind this morning. There will usually be a few thoughts, if I haven't written in a day or so, which will arise right to the surface. I love when words come willingly onto my media. You see, the secret to writing, I think, is in having a trusted mediumistic familiar. A good introduction to what God can do in a writer's life might be expressed in this little saying: no situation is immutable, and there are an infinite number of paths one may take from any given point. From my earliest coherent introduction to writing, I've been told this. I'm so glad that when I was given this advice, a conscious part of me brightly knew that such thinking could turn my poor life around. But I didn't know quite how prolific I would become, the sheer variety and number of music and video projects I would create. So, I can't tell you this, how this little saying was given to impress upon myself the power of spirit to, over time, build a worldly wonder. But the problem was that when a young man has an intellect that is close to the source, he might have to turn around, or be turned around, until he's at the proper spiritual orientation. When I was just out of high school, I was in a predicament. My family history with alcoholism, and the stage I was at in my life journey, somewhat predisposed myself to learning about drinking, and the other drugs. So, by the time that my spiritual walk was developed enough for a mature artistic path to flow through me, I was at the threshold of my 30s, and a turnaround in my life was needed. The serious suicide attempt put me in the state hospital. But God's curse had been reversed. So, I realized that my drinking and pill using had been done only to remedy the adolescent loss of innocence and agitated condition this brought on, and I didn't need either one. Now, this saying, no situation is immutable, and there are an infinite number of paths to take from any given point, came back into my memory, and I began in earnest to build a writing and music and art career. I then only had to somewhat have an unplanned for hard fall, having relapsed after the millennium, in 2003, before I was ready to get into a group home. The writing that I've been able to get down since 2004 has all been done soberly. Well, today is the first Thursday in June this year, and I sit somewhat brainstorming over this new writing, and a new set of the Greg at the piano and page 3 soundscapes. Our weather includes a mixture of sunshine and clouds. The temperature right now, at 2 in the afternoon, is 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Hopefully, later today, I'll get to go to our store and get some weekly groceries. I'll be writing into this article some through the next hour, at least. I'm pretty critical of myself these days. Part of myself seems to disbelieve the providence of this writing being given me, and instead acts like he thinks I'm not worth the effort. But I'm harder on myself than my guys are. I'm trusting that family ties will keep us together. I am, in truth, fairly proud of myself, of both my good inspiration for going the distance with me so well, and of my mortal side, which has seen both sides of the coin, and who never dreamed I'd be able to do the work I do. So, my dreams have come true, to say the least. So, having just gotten back to the apartment from our store trip, I can't begin to relax. It's after 8 p.m., so I've got to get over to the office for my evening medicines. I'm glad to have gotten my afternoon work squared away, and the online part is done for the day, as well. When the others are all back from the store, I'll be resting completely. Well, we're all in now, so I can finally focus on writing this article. I was thinking, just now, what makes for an interesting character study. I think that having a dream-like childhood, then a very rude awakening, with adolescent loss of innocence, and wandering in alcoholic daydreams, for 5 years, then encountering a life of pain, for 7 years, until finally committing attempted suicide. Don't ever do that. You'll then be messed up, and it will be harder walking when you're the perfect picture of self-defeat. Add to this a second life, stirred into motion, by solitary writing, and piano playing for 5 years, then taking another hard fall, with another more serious suicide attempt, and finally, in the state hospital, again, realizing that I was destined for group home living, and lastly being placed into this very path, for the remaining years, to this day. I think that this type of background makes for a dark and brooding character. When he plays jazzy piano, and creates visual art, and video productions, as well. Well, this is a possibly redeemed and happy character. The point I'm making is that you can see a lot through my looking glass. And I enjoy giving back of my literary and artistic inventions into the amateur and not-for-profit internet music and arts culture. I manage over 300 unique download web pages, and this audiobook, when it's completed, will be yet another. But there's something about my life. Due to the scars I try to hide, and my uneducated pride, I'm a complex guy, and somewhat non-competitive. I'll always be living and working on the people's money. That means I've got to have ideal values, and I cannot afford any lapse in my morals whatsoever, such as that could get me into trouble, and I don't want that. So, I'm talking this way, because I know I'll be reading this from time to time, and I need to be impressed of just this very thing. Well, I'll say this, as well. This chapter started out with an essay, in which I pondered if the young graduates would be prepared for the curves ordinary life sometimes throws. I postulated that it would be a young person who is to pay his dues. But the writing came around quickly on me, and I suddenly found that the only one who was paying dues was myself. So never presume to know anything about the good Lord's and the guardian angel's business. Such a mistake will get you into trouble. Well, our time is almost at 10 p.m., and I'll wrap these thoughts up, and edit with the others. Now, all for now, Greg. Till that today is the first Saturday evening in June, this year, and I've just had some dinner, and returned to my apartment, and quickly gotten this writing started. My yoga stretch visualization appears to be perfect for this sort of migraine, so this comes as some comfort to myself, as sometimes I'm impressed with the lonesomeness at mental heights such as these. We had rain earlier, and the winds were blustery as a squall line passed through. Skies have cleared now, though, and the sun is beginning to sink in the west. I'm looking forward to the night, and having this writing started gives me such a focus of concentration. I sit here for a while, mulling over a way in which to take this writing. This present writing will be the 5th article in my new Impromptu Profundity audiobook. I'm very glad to have a willing spirit, and am thinking to myself, how this time for me is some of the best I've had in a while. It's definitely good to be at a long-term place, and the great work that has come in the recent months, the 2 or 3 recent audiobooks this year, are some of my best. I sit here before going over to the office for medicines at 8:30. The gentle sounds of a music-featured podcast are calming and soothing my mind, and I'm enjoying the time. This dusk as twilight is fading. Yesterday's work day, I put together a nice online show, my Greg at the Piano audio-only files, 112 mic recordings of my Maha piano recorded with my handheld device. I think that this is one of my favorite things right now. At any rate, I'm back home, after getting my day's last meeting accomplished. I can easily imagine how older people get along. At the end of the day, migraine headaches are a strong contender for my sanity, and sometimes, some days, life's like a tightrope walk. My handheld information browsing and storing devices aren't meant to get me into trouble. But in internet browsing and scrolling especially is a type of reading experience, which is like trying to walk in a wind tunnel. That's about all I can say about it. When I've got a mind that is susceptible and likely to get ensnared by illusory phenomena, I have to stay away from certain digests online. Some are just fine for me, because their emphasis is on reading, not on amazing everyone with your own home-published sensory bazard. My eyes get way too quick to that sort of thing. But Science Digests, that published news of papers and scientific findings told of in science publications, these are more in my ballpark. I can't sit 4 hours lost in science and news of science. But lifestyle and celebrity digests get my mind off of the rails, if anything will. The reason I'm writing this way is because I will be reading back at this, and I want to impress upon myself the importance of the learning of this lesson for some people. See, because I'll always need to pay attention to what I look at online. What you put in your mind can have real effects on your tendency to relapse into symptoms. At any rate, I'm rediscovering an album I made back in April of last year. It's something like a notch or two above the usual intensity level. For me, every note played has a purpose. Well, the ideas in my head seem to be spinning round. Now, I'll put this composition away for a short while and think of a way through this confusing maze. At any rate, I got to sleep at a good time last night, and got a good night's rest. Now it's Sunday morning, the 2nd one in June, this year, 6:30 a.m., and I stroll in thought to the dewy garden, and get into tune with these thoughts. At such a time as this, writing comes easier, when I'm clean and fresh from my morning shower. So, I don't have to try too hard. We've got a rainy morning, but I think that the clouds are mainly moving on past to the east. When I try and think about how some of the world's greatest art and music is created, I return to the metaphor of a man and woman making friction, jamming in such a way as to produce a child. This is a pretty good metaphor, and the usual African-American euphemism for this is, and has been coined as the term, rock and roll. You see, though, that the door really opens up to the great manifest destiny when the couple interacts across the time and space veil. This kind of grooving is the ticket to the cosmos, which has been at the heart of some of the world's greatest literary and artistic classics. The mortal perspective needs the higher ascended perspective, like the flowers need the rain, to quote the song. So, this which is done here is no mere stream of consciousness blind wandering or groping, but getting into step with the highest, greatest will for ourselves. At any rate, I find myself thinking again about how the linguistic faculty itself is like a gently sloping on-ramp or off-ramp. When the mind grasps this way of saying the glottis and speech ability, I think you're accessing one of the 3 or 4 main mechanisms for reckoning with and taking back, so to speak, the gray areas of the subtle musculature and etheric vehicle, which sometimes appear to materialize or dematerialize, depending on how the spiritual physiology, the astral musculature, the holographic mind-brain picture of one's own soul and spirit is constantly morphing and changing, and being warped by the effects of atmosphere, gravity, biosphere, and beingness. It seems like that when we are in the adult frame of consciousness, we enter into a relationship with our higher spiritual presences, which tends to see the self as a totality of morphing, pliable, plastic self-awarenesses and self-consciousnesses. When I sit, these days, and focus on writing, or music, it's as if my mind turns to silly putty, or plain dough, and living itself becomes a dance, the working of a sort, with one's own self-visualization palette. It's not enough to just sit and ride. There will be ongoings of a ghostly and etheric sort happening at the existential level. A kind of meeting and working of this visualization palette in a manner which can be spoken of. To be more precise, the process I am speaking of transpiring at the soul level with ourselves constantly is known as R&B editing. The messenger R&B is put into the proper order at the level of the eye's retina. This, it is thought, is the lens where this editing takes place, and one's conscious choice-making and intentionality in all of his or her inner ongoings takes place at this retinal visualization palette. This, I think, is where God works with ourselves on a conscious level to make the right choices, to chart the path, the sometimes perilous path, through the tangled jungle vegetation. Depending on how our light shines forth, we are able to introduce order into the chaotic world around us. And, correspondingly, the mental, the intellectual conversation is lead through paths of righteousness. All of the other ways, the arts and sciences, and humanity somewhat begin and end at this existential ground, this visualization palette. Well, anyways, I'm thinking that this article is coming to its eventual conclusion now, and so I begin to wrap these thoughts up and add them in with the others. I'll take a break for a while and see what I have written so far. Well, this reads pretty well, so I guess I'll produce this new chapter and send it along your way now. All for now, Greg.